Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Super excited to be talking about technical SEO, digging into some best practices here. I know we'll probably have some people kind of trickling in as we get started. So I'll just go over a couple of housekeeping things to start while people are coming in. We have got the chat here. So of course, if you've got comments or thoughts throughout the presentation, please feel free to leave them in the chat or questions as well. We also do have a questions feature on the bottom right-hand side of your screen where you can leave questions. Our team will be monitoring both, so feel free to leave them kind of where it makes sense. We'll probably hold most questions until the end. We do have another team member of ours in the chat. You'll find them under Nexus Marketing. If you've got any issues at all, please let them know. They can help, ideally, help you troubleshoot that. All right, quickly, I will go ahead and give an overview of Nexus. Before I do that, we should have a poll going live in just a second. There we go. On kind of how much of a role SEO plays in your day-to-day. Want to get a sense kind of the group that we have here, what it looks like, for kind of experience across the group. So please let me know kind of how much SEO plays a role in your day-to-day. That'll be helpful kind of in my level of explanation for some of these things. So overview of Nexus, we are a digital marketing agency based out of Atlanta, Georgia, and we specialize in inbound lead generation and search engine optimization for businesses selling into mission-driven sectors. So our clients are typically software or service providers that are then selling to nonprofits, healthcare organizations, educational institutions, and associations as well. My role as a client solutions manager, I help onboard new prospects into kind of our network, help organizations figure out what's going to be the best fit for them and how our agency can help solve the problems that they're facing. All right, we are a couple of minutes in, so I think we can go ahead and get started. So would love to kind of kick things off here with, a quick overview of what technical SEO is. So technical SEO refers to your site's health and performance, both of which impact your website's ranking on search engine results pages. Technical SEO optimization is the ongoing process that ensures that your technical foundation is performing at its best. If your technical SEO is poor, search engines are not they're not going to be able to, and they're going to struggle to discover, crawl, and index your site and your content quickly and correctly, which will cost your site valuable traffic, engagement, and conversion. So it's something that's really important, something we think about with our clients all the time, and want to make sure that we can help support. So today we are going to be looking at the 4 pillars of technical SEO: discoverability, crawlability, indexability, and user experience. I'm going to share kind of a little bit more in depth about each one of those and some actionable tips and best practices on how to optimize your technical health and website performance across all of these 4 pillars. So let's dive right in first to discoverability. Discoverability is basically, how Google understands, kind of finds your content in an efficient manner and how they can discover all of the pages on your site. So there are a couple of things you can do to optimize for discoverability, and we've broken it down into these 5 best practices. So site architecture, internal link structure, XML sitemap, index now, and Google's indexing API. So this first one is optimizing your site structure. So making sure that your site has a really logical site architecture using topical clusters, pillar pages, and subfolders. I think for a lot of people, this can be very straightforward. The way that you would want to think about organizing your website logically is likely the best way to do it for Google as well, helping them understand what kind of content is related, what is most important, what is highlighted, all of those good things. So it's not just useful for search engines. It also, I find, is useful when thinking about, kind of from that organizational standpoint, how you want to keep all of your content organized and structured. It's very much intertwined with this next one, improving your internal linking structure. So internal linking is one of the most important factors for search engines on how they discover new content and content that might need to be recrawled or might be worth recrawling if there have been updates. So having a strategically implemented internal link structure is super important. And when we're talking about internal linking structure, we're talking about your main navigation, your sidebar navigation, your footer, as well as on-page links and in-content links. So all of that impacts your site's internal linking structure. All of that kind of encompasses that. And so it's really important. It's one way that Google kind of moves between pages, understanding which pages are related, which ones are the most important, which ones have been highlighted. So it's really important, again, for them to understand kind of the structure of your content and the importance of certain content. This third one here is creating an XML sitemap. So an XML sitemap is basically a file that lists all of the URLs on your website and kind of gives search engines a bit of a roadmap to your website. So, helping them understand what content you have on your site, all of those good things. And it's a really efficient way to quickly kind of give almost like a cheat sheet to your website to Google so they understand what's there, what kind of content, how it's structured, all of that good stuff. Google has within the last couple of months confirmed that they are still using XML sitemaps because of how useful they are. So this is a really good one. If you don't have an XML sitemap already, it's something that is relatively straightforward to implement, and I think can have a really big impact on discoverability. This next one here is one that I think a lot of SEOs know about, but maybe tend to forget about. So there's a really great initiative called Index Now that a lot of search engines participate in. Unfortunately, Google isn't using it yet, but it is basically a way to tell a variety of platforms all at once that you have new content or that content is being updated. So it's a super efficient way to kind of automatically get out your content to some of these other search engines in a more kind of automated way. But you can also leverage Google's indexing API to kind of directly notify Google when there are updates or additions to content. So oftentimes these are used for specific content types that are more time sensitive. And so thinking through job postings, events, things like that. But you can also submit any content to be indexed by Google directly. And there's kind of the way that it currently goes, there's no guarantee how quickly a new piece of content may or may not get indexed. So it's really valuable to, again, either use one of these automated indexing tools like Index Now for some of these other platforms, or directly submit content to Google to be indexed. It's really valuable. Helps us, make sure that your content is showing up on search result pages as soon as possible, which obviously is kind of the goal. Moving right along to crawlability. So crawlability is basically, it refers to how easily a search engine can access your site and pages through the content they've already discovered. So how do we optimize for crawlability? Well, it's all about making it as easy as possible for Google to crawl your website, which means you need to increase the likelihood that your content is linked to a page that Google has already discovered and indexed. These are 5 best practices that we'll walk through. We've got SEO-friendly URL structures, optimizing your crawl budget, avoiding crawler traps, avoiding duplicate content, and improving site speed. To get started here with creating an SEO-friendly URL structure, I actually think this is pretty straightforward. Our best practice here is to make sure you're creating short, descriptive, and consistent URLs that are really easy both for users and for Google and other search engines to understand. So for example, if you are a software provider and you've got a couple of different products or solutions, a lot of organizations will take the structure, they'll have their main domain / solution or product / and then, like a 2 or 3 word description of that product category. You can do the exact same thing with services. Some people will do it with kind of who we serve if they're serving, largely different industries, or just, they want to be able to optimize for keywords specific to certain industries. It could be a main domain / who we serve / nonprofits / higher education / healthcare, kind of whatever that might look like for some of those like multi-audience organizations. But again, keeping URL structures consistent and short and straightforward is going to be kind of the best practice there. When it comes to optimizing your crawl budget, you really want to make sure that you're using it efficiently by addressing issues that might impact search engines' ability to kind of effectively crawl your website. So getting rid of duplicate content, poor internal linking can impact that. Slow loading pages, pretty much anything that's going to make it more difficult for Google's bots to crawl your website. You want to make sure that you're addressing so that you're using your crawl budget as efficiently as possible. Next is avoiding crawler traps. So crawler traps are basically a structural issue within your site that results in crawlers basically like either finding kind of an infinite number of irrelevant URLs or sometimes like getting stuck in like a redirect loop, for example. So again, being really diligent about avoiding duplicate content, appropriately using no-follow tags when needed, being careful about redirects and making sure that you're redirecting things correctly are all really appropriate there. This one has, I've talked about this a couple of times here, but I do think it is important enough that it deserves its own moment, which is avoiding duplicate content. Duplicate content is really confusing for Google. Google only indexes kind of one URL for each unique set of content, but it is challenging for search engines to determine which version to index. And typically what this results in is like every version of the page gets negatively impacted there. It's not sure which one to index, and so it doesn't really show any of them. Lastly, here we have improving site speed. Site speed can be optimized by minimizing redirects, removing duplicate content. Again, it's an important one. Optimizing images, things like that. I'd also recommend testing your page speed with tools like Google PageSpeed Insights. That's the one that we typically recommend. One, it's great to just get a baseline of your site speed, but then they'll also identify areas of improvement that you can work on. Site speed is a pretty major factor in optimizing your technical SEO, so it is really important to be thinking about. All right, moving right along to indexability. Indexability is really about making sure that search engines can accurately understand and index your pages, which makes them eligible to appear in search results. So we're going to be looking at, again, 5 best practices for optimizing for indexability. We're going to look at optimizing your heading structure, canonicalization, which is a bit of a mouthful, implementing schema, optimizing JavaScript SEO, and implementing the hreflang attribute. Again, a bit of a mouthful, typically struggle with that one. So let's move on to heading structure. So, when we're thinking about heading structure, we're thinking about H1s, H2s, H3s, all of those good things. Basically, they help both users and search engines understand how a page is constructed and organized. For example, you should only have a single H1 per page because that really is supposed to demonstrate the overall topic of the content. And then you should be using H2s to differentiate different subtopics, different subsections within the page. H3s, H4s, all of those can then kind of also serve to further break down those pages. I think one thing that can cause issues sometimes is depending on maybe what template you're using or things like that. If your headings are formatted so that they're going to look different visually, sometimes people who don't necessarily have a strong technical SEO background will change the headings because they prefer the visual look of one of the different heading types better than the other. But that can really, throw things off. Like if you're not using an H1, if you have multiple H1s because you're using them more like H2s because you like that visual look, again, that can cause problems. So making sure that you've got like a sequential, logical structure to your headings. And if that means you have to go update your template settings so that looks visually the way that you want it, I think that is certainly valuable and worth your time, but want to make sure that that kind of visual element is not getting prioritized over the actual structure of the headings because they're really important. Next one here is canonicalization. So we touched on this briefly, but search engines are only indexing one version of your content. So if there are multiple versions out there or, content that is considered very similar, it'll go through the canonicalization process, which is basically aimed at figuring out like which one of these versions is the canonical version, which one is the source of truth. So if you have pages on your site that are very similar, you can manually tag one version as the canonical version. Or for example, if you are publishing your content on multiple different domains, you want an article or a page, like a blog piece that you've put on your website, someone else wants to repost that, making sure that yours is marked as canonical and theirs is not, is going to help Google understand that that is the original piece of content. That's the source of truth. That'll be the one that it indexes, and that's the one that will show in result pages. So again, super important, pretty straightforward way to help mark that there, but it's really valuable. Next up is schema. So leveraging schema is a great way to provide some additional context about your content to Google and other search engines. So schema is structured data that can give additional information about an organization, about an individual at that organization, the type of content, whether something is an event page, a job posting, a review, things like that. It's just another way to make it easier for search engines to understand what they're looking at. For example, right, when you Google an organization and on the right pops up, it's got their location, their phone number, contact information, reviews and things. A lot of that is getting pulled from that structured data from the schema markup. Really, it makes it very easy for Google to pull that information because it knows exactly what it's looking at. And again, really valuable there in terms of making sure that everything is getting indexed correctly and is easy for Google to understand. Really kind of the best practice here with JavaScript is kind of not to do too much with it, or certainly not to do too much with it when it comes to the crucial elements of your SEO. So really anything that is truly essential from that SEO perspective, your main navigation, metadata, things like that, that's really important to be in your website's core HTML and to not use JavaScript to load or update those things. Obviously, you can use JavaScript in other ways to make tweaks, to work on other elements of your site, but anything that is really crucial for SEO should be in that HTML and not using JavaScript to update or to modify. Google, when it indexes your website, it indexes that original HTML version, and then it can sometimes get confused if there's, once it goes through that JavaScript, if there's changes there. So it's best, again, for those core SEO elements to avoid JavaScript where possible. Finally, I'll talk about hreflang. Again, it's a bit of a mouthful. this may not be relevant for everyone. It's typically more relevant for organizations that have international audiences. But hreflang can be used on sites that appeal to different audiences in different regions that are speaking different languages. And it helps search engines know kind of which languages or regional versions of a web page are available so that they can help kind of serve up the right one, depending on the audience. Again, this may or may not be super relevant to y'all kind of based on your own audience or kind of your own kind of global impact there. But interesting, and I think important for organizations that do see traffic from multiple different countries, especially those that are using other languages. All right, finally, we're going to talk about user experience. So user experience, or it's often shortened to UX, refers to how a visitor interacts with your website and then how that site responds. So for example, if a page takes forever to load, or you're clicking around in a website and you come up on a 404 error, that's not a positive experience as a user. So one, it gives a negative experience to the individual person on your website, but Google will also make note of that as well. So how do we optimize for user experience? We're really going to be looking at kind of two core pieces here. So the first is you'll want to optimize your core web vitals, which is a way to measure the user experience of a page. There are a bunch of different tools you can use here. We typically use Page Speed Insights. I mentioned that before. And that's a great way to understand kind of your current performance and then identify those things that need improvement. Some of the key metrics are largest contentful paint, which is how long that largest visual element of a page takes to load. Sometimes, right, especially when you're maybe on your phone, you go onto a website and that first image takes a while. That's largest contentful paint. Interaction to next paint is another big one, which is basically like how quickly a website responds once a user has interacted. So when you click on something, how quickly is it to load, to open whatever you've clicked on, that type of thing. And then we've got cumulative layout shift, which is how much the content on a page shifts unexpectedly during that loading process. I don't know about you, but I have often been in that experience where you're on your phone, a page loads, you go to click on something, and between your thumb moving and your thumb hitting the screen, it has shifted a little bit and you accidentally end up clicking on something you didn't mean to. That is kind of in that cumulative layout shift area. So that's what that looks like. Again, there are a bunch of different things you can do there, but my recommendation would be to use some of those tools like Page Speed Insights to get a sense of how things are going, and then they'll provide recommendations on how to make improvements on some of those metrics, which is great. Then, of course, we've got accessibility. So making sure that your website works well across different devices. Mobile is particularly important for SEO, but also making sure that it's accessible in different regions, and then also kind of when being used by differently abled users. So thinking through like implementing alt tags on your images, or adding transcripts or closed captioning for your videos to help support, all differently abled users is really important there. All right, so I think we are going to have some time for questions at the end, but quickly, kind of to wrap up, I do want to touch on process implementation and tooling. So we've got another poll that I am going to put out now about kind of how often you're kind of monitoring your website's technical SEO performance. Would love to get a sense of what that looks like for y'all. It is something that our belief is that it's something you should be implementing into your kind of regular website work. So would be curious to see kind of how this group is doing in terms of implementation there. So a couple of things to note here. One, search engines never sleep. They're constantly and consistently crawling content. So it is important that you're monitoring your site regularly. Technical SEO also as a field is never really done, because it is continuously evolving as these search engines are evolving. So it's important to make sure that you're staying up to date with best practices, but also that your website is staying up to date with best practices. Something that you put into effect a year ago for technical SEO may no longer be as up to date as it could be. And so it's good to keep things relevant. Our recommendation and what we do with clients is, our recommendation is to perform a technical SEO audit anywhere from 3 to 4 times a year, roughly once a quarter that's what we implement with our clients. We want to make sure that it is a regular enough cadence that you're taking kind of a full look at your performance, identifying opportunities for improvement, and obviously making fixes as needed. Yeah, it looks like, it's so funny. It looks like kind of the vast majority of people are either kind of never looking or only looking when something goes wrong. I think it is perfectly reasonable. A lot of people are not necessarily technical SEO experts or website experts. So it's definitely something that we would recommend implementing more regularly. Again, our best practice is kind of 3 to 4 times a year, but I think even if you can get into once, twice a year, like really trying to make sure that you're doing it beyond just trying to put out fires, I think is really valuable there. In terms of tooling and different tools, there are a bunch of different tools that can be really useful in monitoring your technical SEO performance. For audits, our team typically uses SEMrush or Screaming Frog, both of which are really great. There are a bunch of other tools out there though, so I highly recommend doing some research, finding one that works for you, and that's going to kind of provide you with the most relevant insights. I think both of these are great, but again, feel free to, of course, use whatever tool you think is most relevant. And then there are also a number of tools that are good for kind of ongoing monitoring. I've highlighted 2 here. I think this is really most relevant for organizations that have a very large website, or a website that maybe is going through a lot of changes or updates regularly, or maybe have multiple team members that are making changes on the website. This is really good. It can flag things very quickly if there are issues. Again, probably not super necessary for organizations with smaller websites or smaller teams. But again, like if you're working for a huge organization, you've got tens of different people updating different parts of the website, it's really valuable to have some of these ongoing monitoring tools to help flag issues before they turn into anything major there. All right, so would love to pause here for questions. Okay, I've got a great one here about optimizing images. Does that mean the size, kind of what size, PNG, like all of those things? Like what does optimize mean? That's a great question. So one, I would definitely say like size and kind of condensing images. So, you don't want huge images. You want them also to be kind of high quality. So thinking about the size and quality, there isn't really like a perfect size. I know that's kind of a terrible answer. The answer, like, it depends. In terms of format, there isn't, one that we strongly recommend over the other. We typically, with clients, I believe, use PNG and JPEG. But again, part of that can also depend a little bit on your CMS, your individual website. But making sure that you're using high quality images, that you're utilizing alt text, that the images, again, aren't too big and aren't like too heavily relying on code. Really valuable here. I think, for those of you that are thinking about using images, again, I would say kind of not too large, highest quality. And a lot of that you can kind of tell based off of just like the visual impact. If it's taking up way too much of that initial page, it's probably too big there. And then there are tools online that you can get to help like condense the format of your images. That can be valuable there as well. All right. Any other questions that would be valuable for us to talk about. We are right about at time. I know we've got kind of a mix of current clients and not current clients on the call. So if you are a current client, and you've got questions about technical SEO or have concerns about your technical SEO, of course, please feel free to reach out to your account manager. They're going to be the best one to kind of raise those issues, and they can kind of give an update on what the current status is. And of course, if you're not a client and you do have questions or want to talk to us more about what improving your technical SEO looks like, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm always happy to hop on a call and answer questions or share resources that we have. If we don't have any other questions, it is 1:30, so I will go ahead and let y'all go. This recording will be sent out afterwards, so hopefully it is a great resource, and I appreciate y'all taking the time today. All right, have a good one, and excited to see y'all soon for our next event. Bye.